All right, today we look at the story of a woman who was placed in the prime spot in order to save an entire people. And her story is in the only book in the Bible that does not mention the name of God. Any ideas where we're going? Oh, you can't say? Okay. Any guesses? Okay, what?
It's Esther.
The book of Esther. It is the only book of the Bible that does not mention the name of God in it. But you can't read the book without seeing God's handiwork all through it. And I'm using a mic this week because I got really hoarse last week. So I was a little excited. It was a good message. Huh? We need to remember that even though we may be going through a struggle or a situation that seems impossible, we just need to be where we need to be so that God can use us for such a time as this. And I encourage you to go home and read the book of Esther, or listen to it on an audio book. You can find it on YouTube. I looked it up, and most of them are about 30 minutes long. So that's all it takes you to get through these 10 chapters of Esther. But there's a lot in there, and we'll try to, within the next 18 hours, we will try our best to cover the story of Esther. Oh, yeah. It's Father's Day. I can go as long as I want to. It's my day. Okay, my wife said I cannot go 18 hours. All right. The story starts out with the queen Vashti being summoned by her husband, King Ahasuerus, to show off her beauty to all that was attending this massive 6-month-long feast. Now, Tim, you and I, we could appreciate a 6-month-long feast, couldn't we? Oh, yeah, we can go. Much, and hopefully there's time for us to sleep during that time. But I mean, 6 months of turkey and dressing, sign me up. 6 months of chicken and dumplings, sign me up. 6 months of these peanut butter cookies, sign me up. It's a feast. You gotta have dessert. 6 months of my wife's chicken strips or Nanny's lasagna, I'm all for it. I'm ready to go for that. But as they were attending this feast, the queen said, "No, I'm not coming out. You're not going to parade me around to your friends like a piece of meat." And so Vashti didn't come out. And that caused a lot of problems. The king was furious and listened to his servants, to his advisors. And they said, "You've got to do something with your wife. Because if you don't punish her for this, then every woman in the kingdom is going to think that they can do the same thing, and then we as men won't have control over our wives." And so the queen banished her. That's the queen. Oh, the king banished the queen and kicked her off of the throne and put her away. And that's the last that we ever hear of Queen Vashti. Nobody knows where she moved to or the rest of her life, but she was sent to a harem. Okay, I never found that one. Okay. And that all takes place in the first chapter of the book. In the second chapter, the hunt for a new queen takes place, and the king put out a decree across the entire kingdom And in Esther chapter 2, verse 3, it says, "Gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel, or the capital, under the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. And so while they were doing the search, they found a Jewish woman who was just drop dead gorgeous. Her name was Hadassah. And she was living with her uncle Mordecai. And she fit the description that the king gave perfectly. I mean, you couldn't find a better. I mean, she could have been the world's best top model. So the officers took her to Susa, but her uncle told her not to tell anyone that she was a Jew. And this is important because during this time, the Jewish nation had been captured by the Babylonians. The Babylonians were overthrown by the Persians. And so she's basically a slave in a foreign land who is now being taken to the capital city to possibly be the queen, and if not, then she'll end up in a harem, but we'll get to that in a second. As Hadassah was taken to Susa, she went through a purification ritual that lasted an entire year. 6 months for beautification through oil and myrrh, and another 6 months with spices and ointments for women. And once that year had finished, and it came time for her to go see the king, could you imagine how nervous this young girl would have been? Most believe that she was probably around 14 years of age because she wasn't married. And she's going for her time before the king. If the king loved her and she found approval in his eyes, then she could be queen. If not, she would be placed in a harem and become one of his concubines, which basically means she was his play toy. And that would have probably been the end that we would have ever heard. So before The Bachelor, this was the first Bachelor. And she's going to see the king. I remember how nervous I was standing outside in my boss's backyard, waiting for Cherie to come around the corner and come out for us to get married. I was nervous. I was shaking. And I caught a glimpse of her in the picture windows and I just started bawling. But I was excited, but I was nervous because I already knew everything in my life was about to change. I mean, it was changing for the good, but it was still change. But imagine how Hadassah felt. Because it wasn't just changing because she would be queen. She's either going to be queen, which is ironic as a slave, or she was basically going to be a prostitute from then on. Her life, as she knew it, would never, ever be the same. I imagine she'd be shaking, butterflies in her stomach, maybe even a little nauseous. And now it's time. The door opens and she walks in to the room of the king. And he fell in love with her. He was smitten with her. As we found out in the movie Bambi, he was Twitter-pated with her. And if you don't believe me, it tells us in chapter 2, verse 17, it says, "The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti." Now this is important that this took place, because even though it's never mentioned, God was protecting her. Her reputation was on the line. I mean, you see some of these people walking up and down the streets. You know what they do. You know their reputation. You've heard about people. You've seen people. You know their reputation. We may have even said it ourselves. Your reputation precedes you. We've heard about people like you. But God was protecting her. He was able to keep her pure. He gave her favor among the eunuchs that were over her, gave her favor with the king, that when she walked into the room, his eyes bugged out of his head and was like, whoa! That's my queen. We'll see how much he loved her a little bit later. Said she was the loveliest. Remember, Hadassah's uncle told her, do not tell anyone who you really are. So when he married her, he used her Persian name, Esther, which means bride, star, myrtle, and was derived from Ishtar, which was one of the Babylonian gods that was worshipped. But Hadassah means myrtle, righteousness, peace, and resilience. So she didn't lose who she was just because she had a different name. She lived up to that, and we'll see her resilience in a little while. So we made it through chapter 2. Chapter 3 unfolds, and one of the king's officials had a really bad attitude, especially towards the Jews. This official was named Haman, and Haman was a bad dude. He had a huge pride issue, and he thought that he was better than everybody else, and he could do whatever he wanted to. He had been promoted up and was one of the top men in the king's arsenal. Anytime that Haman would go anywhere, especially the city gate where people would hold business and conduct the affairs of the city and disputes were handled, everyone would bow down to him. They would kiss his signet ring, and I mean, he was worshipped like a god. Well, that was everyone but this one little old Jewish dude that would never bow down. His name, Mordecai. And that just incensed Haman. I mean, Haman was outraged. But see, Mordecai didn't not bow down because he hated Haman. He did it because he knew the God of his fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was the true God and the only one worth worshiping. No matter what Haman did, no matter where he was, no matter who else was around, Mordecai would not bow down. And we see in verses 5 and 6 of chapter 3, Haman decided it was time to get even. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on him alone. So as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. So Haman went to the king and came up with this big lie that you know he doesn't do what you say he does. He's plotting against you, king. He's not going to ever follow you. And it's this certain people that don't even follow your laws, and they should be destroyed. Well, this king does like so many leaders do. They don't seek the counsel of God. It sounded good. Hey, you don't want to follow my rules? Off with your head, like the Queen of Hearts said. And so he makes this decree that every Jew shall be killed, be put to death, be destroyed. He bought this lie, hook, line, and sinker, took the signet ring, sealed the document. Young and old, women and children, all in one day, should be put to death. And when a king signs with his ring, there's no way to revoke it. It's done, and it's over. And that's where we pick up with our message today. Not Ezekiel. We're not going that far. Esther, chapter 4. Verses 1 through 3. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the people, or the midst of the city, and he cried out with loud and bitter cries. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. And Esther did what we often need to do. Oh, sorry, I skipped a part. Mordecai and several of the other Jews heard this. They went to the gate. They wept. They tore their clothes. They sat in sackcloth and ashes. We talked about last week and the week before that sackcloth and ashes was a sign of great anguish and distress. And we're just at our wits' end. It's that we're crying out, God be with us. It's that I don't know what else to do. God, you have got to move. And here they are. They're weeping. Mordecai knew that the only one in the kingdom that could do anything to help was his niece. Picking up in verses 4 and 5. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. So she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. And that's where we come to our first point. Is when we see a need, inquire about it. Ask about it. When she heard from her attendants what was going on, she sent clothes for her uncle. You're in sackcloth. There must be something wrong. Here, I will send you clothes. Clean yourself up. One, you kind of look bad. But she sent clothes. She tried to help the situation. But he refused. But when she heard that he was in sackcloth and ashes, she knew something wasn't right. So she sent back word. What do we do when we see someone that's in need, that needs help? We see them all the time. We see them on the street corners. We see them in front of businesses. What do? Do we just see a scam artist, a hopeless case, an inconvenience? I've been there too. I've thought those. But what if, just maybe, we stopped and asked what their need is? Because some of them may not necessarily need or want your handout. Maybe they just need to know that somebody cares, that somebody's willing to listen. I remember the first time I went to a hospital visit after surrendering to preach. 18 years old, and go up to the hospital waiting room for a friend that was having surgery. I get there just as the doctor was going in. I was like, okay, I know enough to know. Wait outside to let him visit with the family. The doctor leaves, and I peek around the corner, and I see everybody crying. Like, well, this is not good. Okay, so it's two things. Surgery didn't go well, or they died on the operating table. Either way, this is not going to be fun for me to have to walk into. So I gave him a little bit of time, and then I walk in, and his wife says, "Did you hear what the doctor said?" And I said, "No, I saw him come in and I waited." So surgery took longer than they thought it would, and his chest swelled, and they can't sew him up. And so they have him packed, but we don't know what's going to happen. This far down the line, I don't know what I would still say in that situation. But as an 18-year-old, I really had no clue. I just sat there, cried with him, I held him, I hugged him. And then finally she said, "Would you mind praying?" I prayed. I don't know what I prayed. I went back to the office. I just slumped down in the secretary's office, and I just felt so defeated. Because I failed. I didn't have any pastoral words of wisdom. I didn't have anything encouraging to say. A couple of weeks later, everything started improving, and she was at church, and she gave me a big hug and said, "Thank you. You said everything that I needed to hear." And I was like, I didn't say anything. I know. Sometimes people don't need you to say anything. They just need to know that you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. See, we need to be checking about them. And I'm not just talking about the ones on the street corner. I'm talking about our friends, our family, our neighbors. It's amazing. For Memorial Day, Sheree made some pies, some little cooler pies, and she gave them to all of our neighbors. Most of our conversation is hi, and that's about all we get. But every single one of them were appreciative of the pies. And our very next door neighbor, he went right inside and he said, "Hey, they made us a pie." And so they were excited that somebody cared. Was it that much work? I mean, Cool Whip and lemonade, right? That's it? And some sugar, and you're done. Throw it in a freezer and it's ready to go. Did it take that much work? Did it take that much effort? We didn't even sit there. Is there anything that we can pray for you about? Do you know Jesus as your Savior? But they knew something about us just off of those pies. We care about you. See, sometimes we need to see that. It's part of what we're called to do, is to take time to listen. And when we're providing a need for someone, we're actually doing it for Jesus Christ. Jesus said these words in Matthew chapter 25, verse 40. Truly I say to you, as you did it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. When we do it to others, we are doing it to Christ. So when we see a need, may we reach it. We need to be others focused. How can we possibly tell them the truth of the gospel if we've never tried to even be nice to them and talk to them and see what their need is? It's difficult to see others' needs when we have navel vision. When we're constantly looking at ourselves, you know what you see? You see your belly button. Have you looked at your belly button? Is this the prettiest thing in the world? I mean, don't you just sit there and take selfies of your belly button all day long? Because, I mean, that's just the cutest thing. And post it all over, and anytime you run into, hey, you want to see my belly button? But yet, what do we talk about all the time? Ourselves. See, we can't think about others or look at others when all we're doing is looking at ourselves. Is that how we are supposed to live? Is that how we want to live? We need to get back to the right way. So let's see a need and ask about it. And then pick up in verse 10. Mordecai sends word about everything that has happened. And then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called in to the king these 30 days. It's been a month. So she's been called. She can't do anything. She can't go talk to the king. It's not like we come home and you want to have a conversation with somebody, you just walk into the room. You can't do that with the king, even though she was queen. And in these two verses, we find ourselves right back to where we were, what we were talking about. It's a very easy thing for us to do, but it's so detrimental to our faith walk to just think of ourselves. Think of our well-being. But the second thing that we must do is stop making excuses. Just act. Just do it. Just go with it. That's it. That's all we have to do. We just need to see the need and act upon it. This doesn't mean you just throw money at the issue. That doesn't mean we just give them everything that they ask. Because they may be asking for one thing and their need is something else. You know how it is at Christmas time. What do you need for Christmas? Well, I need a bike. I need some Air Jordans. I need a Mazda, a Lamborghini. No, you don't need a Lamborghini. You need a vehicle. So let me get you a Honda Accord. Guess what? It has 4 wheels. Has an engine. It runs. You're good. I always wanted a convertible. I still hadn't had a convertible. I still hadn't drove a convertible. I always wanted a Mustang. I still hadn't drove a Mustang, but I've had multiple cars. Guess what? They all worked good and a lot cheaper than the insurance on a Mustang. We need to stop making excuses. Mordecai didn't need money. He needed someone to listen to the situation and find a solution. Is that too much for us to do? Is it really? Surely we're not that vain to think that they are beneath us, that they are below us. Are we really that busy that we can't stop, listen, and help someone else? God has given us the events that have taken place in our life to shape us so that we can reach and minister to those around us. Not all of us are great plumbers. Not all of us are good nurses. Not all of us are good typists and data entries. Not all of us are good musicians, but all of us have a purpose. All of us are given tools and resources. Look back at your life. Has anyone come alongside of you to help you along? To point the way to you? To show you things from a different perspective? Maybe a way out of your problem or situation? Could it just possibly be that you and I could be that for someone else? Or is all that this life is about just us? It's not that difficult to do. And here's where the story flips. Esther made the excuse, I can't go before the king because he hasn't called me, and if I go and he doesn't extend the scepter, I'm going to die right here, and I can't help you if I'm dead. Because once I'm dead, I'm dead. Pick up verse 12. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to this kingdom for such a time as this. And there's the challenge. Who knows? Who knows? Don't you love that phrase? It's okay if someone asks you what you want to eat for lunch today. Who knows? Where would you like to go for a vacation? Who knows? When we were a kid, what would you like to be when you grow up? Who knows? That's okay. But when you go to the doctor and you're having problems and you have tests run, you don't want to get that answer like what you got with the car. Who knows what it is? You ran all these tests and you have no idea. What was so frustrating with Mama when she was in the hospital for so long. They'd run all these tests. Well, you don't know what's going on with you. You just got something going on. We don't like that. Who knows? Comes to a life or death situation, we don't want to hear the doctor say, well, got some bad news. You got a terminal disease. Who knows if you're going to live or not? I want a second opinion now. Stat! Give me some help. I know. You're going through marital issues and divorce might be around the corner. Will you end up divorced? Who knows? Is that what we want to hear? I would much rather be told a definite answer, no. Or even if it's not what I want to hear, rather than a who knows. But this who knows goes even deeper. That's why we need to say that who knows isn't the end of the sentence. It's not the end of the sentence. Who knows comes at the first of the sentence, because there's more to the story. Notice that entire verse. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows, and here's the rest of it, whether you have been put in this place for such a time as this. I love what Bible teacher Kelly Mentor says in her study on this section of Esther. Would God really use Esther, one whose position came through marriage to a pagan king, whose Jewish identity was unknown? So much about this situation was outside of Israel's norm. Mordecai may not have been fully certain about whether God would use Esther, but we can almost see his faith putting the pieces together. If God's covenant was unwavering, why couldn't Esther be one of the women God would use to save the Jewish people? What about you? Could God possibly be using you for such a time as this? Could it be that you are the who knows? Could it be that God is opening doors for you to walk through? You might be the one person that is used to completely and utterly change someone else's life. Look at verses 15 through 17. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days. Night or day, I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered. And there it is. Before acting, we must seek God's direction. We must seek God's direction. Because if we just see a need and we meet it, before long, we're not going to have any money to meet our needs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, be on the lookout of how you can be a need meter. Notice the first thing that she did was to call a fast among all the Jews. I told them to eat or drink nothing for 3 days and nights. And then Esther didn't just stop there. She said, "Me and my servants, we're going to do the same thing." Because it was made evident, you're not going to escape either, Esther. This is coming for you as well. The Lord knows where you are, plus what you can and cannot do. If all you can do is pray, you're right where you need to be. Because there are some that physically can't go and do a whole lot of things. But one thing that they can do is pray. It shouldn't be our last resort. If all you can do is pray, that's enough for Him. Take comfort in that and keep praying. Maybe she remembered this time the words of King Solomon in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely upon your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. That's the key. We just need to do it. Before we're acting, we must seek God's direction. And I love this, chapter 5. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter, and the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you, even to the half of my kingdom." Don't you like that? She was so nervous about going in, and God paved the way for her. The path was made straight. And the king comes in. So we see, just do it. Nike had it right all along. Just do it. When you pray about it and you feel that God has given you the go ahead, just do it. Just walk in like you own the place. Esther walks in. The king sees her. "Ooh, it's my wife. I wonder what she's got. Why she's coming to see me. Of all people, why she wants to see me?" He's the king. He has all the power. But he's excited to see her and extends that scepter. God moved in a mighty and powerful way. Not only did he preserve her life, but he gave her so much favor with the king that he was willing to give up to half his entire kingdom. Don't you love that? He just was ready to say yes just to make her happy. Reminds me of a story about author and dignitary Bob Goff. He tells of his love for playing practical jokes on his buddies. His friend Doug made the mistake of telling him where he was celebrating his 10th wedding anniversary and the penthouse suite that he had prepared for it. A few days later, he and his wife checked into the hotel as Doug and his wife. They were handed the key and then took the elevator straight up to the penthouse. They called room service and ordered lobster and salmon, and for dessert they ordered bananas Foster which they had never had before. It was so good, they ordered seconds. And after finishing dinner and taking in the panoramic views, they gave a huge tip to the waiter, and the bill totaled more than $400. They tidied up the room and then left, and Bob woke up the next morning just thinking about Doug's reaction when he saw the room service bill as he checked out of the hotel. That's a kind of a mean joke, but he figured that eventually his friend would get back at him. Just trying to wait, see when. A few years later, Bob received a phone call from a man with a heavy Ugandan accent who said, "Bob, I'm aware of what you've been doing with Uganda children in prisons in our judiciary process, and I want to thank you on behalf of the president. In fact, I'm so pleased, I want you to consider becoming the counsel of the Ugandan government." Well, Bob's mind immediately went back to his friend Doug and said, "Yep, he's got me. Sure, I'll consider," is what he said. He didn't even think more about it and headed back to Uganda a few weeks later. The next 2 months were very busy. He had forgotten all about the phone call. But then one day the phone rang, and it was the same gentleman on the phone asking Bob to fly to New York to meet him. Of course, Bob said, "Sure, be love to." So he flew to New York and headed to his hotel, fully expecting a note to be handed him from Doug and letting him in on the prank with the words, "Go ahead and get a lobster, it's on me." But surprisingly, that's not what happened. A car with a Ugandan flag pulled up to the hotel, and a man stepped out of the vehicle and introduced himself. "I'm Ambassador Kumanawar." And Bob said, "Of course you are." Thinking, okay, this is a little elaborate. And he then proceeded to introduce himself to several Ugandan dignitaries. He said, I've got all the paperwork done for you to become special consul to the U.S. for Uganda. All you have to do is give me a couple of passport pictures and I'll get the Parliament to approve it. Okay, maybe this wasn't a joke after all. And about a few weeks later, he got his diplomatic credentials and they had a big ceremony, and that's how Bob Goff became the consul to Uganda for the United States. He later writes, I think God sometimes uses the completely inexplicable events of our lives to point us towards Him. All he did was say yes, and everything fell in place. Imagine what would happen if we would just say yes when God asks us to do something. It could be life or death to someone else. Well, remember how Esther became queen? She just simply was there. The king had a banquet, wanted his wife to appear, and she refused. Well, the request that Esther gave the king, I want you and your little servant over here, Haman, to come to a banquet that I'm throwing. Well, the king remembered what happened with his wife and was like, I don't want to make her mad, but she's giving me a party. So sure, we would love to come. Well, Haman, he's already puffed up enough, so he thought this was a great idea, so he agrees to come. And they have this beautiful banquet, the celebration, everything's going great. And I said, well, what is it that you want? He said, if I've found favor in your sight, I want the two of you to come back for a private party tomorrow night. And so everything was going great until it wasn't. Because at this point, Haman had finally had enough of Mordecai. And he had came up with the perfect plan. He had built gallows outside the city, and he was going to put him to death. But he happened to walk in on the king going through some records because he couldn't sleep. And Mordecai had found out that there was a plot to kill the king. And so, as he was going through, there was nothing ever done to thank Mordecai. And so the king said, Haman, what would you do for somebody who saved the life of the king? Well, of course, Haman, being a pompous jerk and having that navel disease, sat there and he thought the king was talking about himself. Oh, put him on the king's finest horse, put the king's robe and signet ring on him, and parade him through the city saying, this is what the king does for whose favor is on him. And the king says, that's great. You lead the parade for Mordecai. What? No. So he does this. He's devastated. He is humiliated. He can't even stand the taste. I'm sure he had to come in, wash that stench that he was feeling off, and then he finds out he's got to go back and see the queen again. At least somebody recognizes who he is and wants to spend time with him. But it's not all that he thinks it is. And this is where who knows and for such a time as this comes into play. Chapter 7. So the king and Haman went in to feast with Queen Esther. And on the second day they were drinking wine after the feast. And the king again said to Esther, what is your wish? I went blank. What is your... it shall be granted to you, and what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king." Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, "Who is he and where is he who has dared to do this?" And Esther said, "A foe and enemy, this wicked Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. And the king arose in his wrath from the wine drinking and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther, for he saw that harm was determined against him by the king. Uh-oh. Haman just thought he was having a bad day. And the king just now finds out that the queen is a Jew, so did Haman. And Haman just realized his days are numbered. The king was probably had never been this mad in his life. And I can imagine. It's okay if you come after me. It's okay whatever you want to say about me. But you come after my wife. It's Fist City time. Somebody comes after Cherie, I don't care what happens to me. You ain't going down without a fight. If I die, I die, but I'm going to die protecting her. Because that's what you do. The king is so furious, he goes out for a little bit. And here's Haman begging and begging and begging for his life. And it gets even worse. Look at verses 8 through 10. And the king returned from the palace garden to the place where they were drinking wine, and Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. And the king said, "Will he even assault the queen in my presence, in my own house?" As the word left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, "Moreover, the gallows that Haman was prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, is standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high." And the king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Man, it don't get more ironic than that, now does it? The king comes in and sees Haman laying all over the queen, because he was holding on to her and then fell on her. You think he was upset before he walked out of the room? He really irate now. And the very means of death that Haman had set forth was now used on himself. And in an even more twist of irony, the king gave Esther the house of Haman, promoted Mordecai to the position that Haman had, and gave him the signet ring, and gave him what he wanted. And his fame rose across the land. It just gets better and better. Now remember, there wasn't anything that the king could do to change the law, to destroy the Jews. But he said, use this ring to put an order that all Jews can defend and protect themselves in battle. And the scripture goes on to tell us that the Jews overcame all 10 of Haman's sons and the Persians that rose against them. And in another ironic move, all 10 sons were hanged on the same gallows that their father were, that was prepared for Mordecai. The Jews were saved because Esther was willing to rise up and take a stand. She was willing to see a need and inquire about it. She was willing to just do it. Are we willing? Are we willing to take a stand? Will we see a need and fill it. Let me close with this story. On April 20th, 1999, just outside of Denver, Colorado, in a little place that most people wouldn't even know was on the map, a place called Littleton, Colorado, there was a mass shooting at a high school named Columbine. I'm sure you remember seeing it unfold on the news. I was right there, about an hour away from it in Colorado Springs when it took place. Okay. Born on August 5th, 1981, Rachel Scott was a devout Christian from an early age. She even thought about becoming a religious missionary after graduating from Columbine High School. Sadly, she never got that chance. On April 20th, 1999, she was having lunch with friend Richard Castaldo outside the entrance of their high school when Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold began their attack. The two shooters had intended on killing as many of their peers and classmates as possible in an attempt to beat Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh's kill count. They were forced to resort to their arsenal of firearms when the two main propane bombs they'd made failed to detonate. They charged the school's entrance, where Castaldo recalled that Harris and Klebold started yelling at Rachel Scott. Investigations after the tragic event indeed reported that Eric Harrison asked Rachel Scott whether she believed in God before he killed her. Scott's mother, Beth Nemo, also said that during the weeks before the Columbine massacre, both Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold mocked Rachel and made fun of her because of her Christian values. She was actually on their target list. Nemo additionally published Rachel Scott's journals after she died in an effort to show the world how strong her daughter's Christian values were, and presumably to facilitate mentally processing that her 17-year-old daughter was shot to death. Both parents eventually co-authored her biography. Said, "I'm not going to apologize for speaking the name of Jesus," Scott wrote in her journal. "If I have to sacrifice everything, I will." Her dad later said she was talking about things like not judging or labeling people, looking for good in others, and being a leader, showing mercy and forgiveness. Her brother said, "I have this theory that if one person will go out of their way to show compassion, it will start a chain reaction of the same." What if you're here for such a time as this? What if somebody's who knows is for you to answer? When we see a need, inquire about it. Stop making excuses and just act. Who knows isn't the end of the sentence. Before we act, we must seek God's direction. And do it and watch God move like only He can. This was Esther's story. We heard Hezekiah's story. We've seen Naaman's story. We read the widow and her son's story. Will we hear your story? This is why I tell my story. Will you tell yours? God, thank you that you love us. Thank you that you have given us the ability to be in places for such a time as this. May we seek you with all that we have. May we seek to inquire about someone's need. Act upon it. Seek your will and just do it. and watch you move. May we spend this week telling others our story, not for us to get the glory, but for you to have your name spread about what love, mercy, and freedom you bring. In your name we pray. Amen. Glad that you were here today. We'll see you next week.
I think that the way